This is assignment 4.1 about the ethical and legal considerations. So first of all, what are ethical and legal issues? Well, ethics are what are morally right and wrong. For example, under no circumstances should anyone be physically or mentally hurt. And legal refers to what the law says, and it's working within the civil law boundaries. And obviously there are consequences for not abiding by both sets of these rules. For someone to go ahead and conduct research, they must receive ethical clearance from the Ethics Committee, which is under the Code of Conduct for BASES, or British Association for Sport and Exercise Sciences. So an Ethics Committee is a group of people who specialise in the sort of research you wish to conduct. They're knowledgeable and understand the area of research you wish to study. Before anyone has the ability to conduct any research, they must complete a project proposal form and write in detail information like the procedure of the study, the sample they intend to use and how to use it, etc. They then weigh up the risks versus benefits of a study and finally decide if they should give you clearance to conduct it, which I'll go on to talk about next. The ethical clearance process has 4 stages. The first stage is when BASES checks the research and ensures you have everything required, such as the protocol or a step-by-step guide, the safety hazards and protections, and finally the informed consent. The next stage is when your application goes to an independent specialist panel, for example the Ethics Committee, who check it. This is where the risk-benefit analysis comes in and relates back to the last slide. So here is when they weigh up how many risks there are in the study and how many benefits there are. If the benefits outweigh the amount of risks, then a study is allowed to be conducted. However, if the risks outweigh the benefits, then it will not be allowed to take place. Finally, once the clearance is given, this will ensure that all form of protection is undergone. For example, there will be certainty that there will be no physical, mental, social, or psychological harm at any point during the study. So now to BASES, or the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. It is a professional body for sport and exercise sciences in the UK, and if somebody wanted to conduct some research in the sports science field, they would have to be accredited by them and abide by their code of conduct throughout their experiment. In order for someone to get accredited, however, they need to be experienced and competent, so be qualified and meet the criteria to join BASES. One of their points in their code of conduct is using data protection from the Data Protection Act of 1998. So researchers should be aware of this act because it relates to the Parliament defining ways in which information about people in studies can be used, keeping those people safe from any sort of abuse. This refers to the personal information given by the participants, like date of birth, address, age, etc. The next one is having ethical clearance from a professional body to go ahead and actually conduct the study. The third is having a professional conduct about you and being experienced and knowledgeable so the participants are safe and secure. Another one is a legal requirement, which is having informed consent from the participants you want to use in the experiment. And informed consent is when the participants must sign a form that has everything about the study on there. For example, why you intend to conduct the research, who you want to use, what the procedure will be, and then most importantly, knowing the risks and hazards and understanding that they can withdraw at any time. Then finally, linking back to having a professional conduct, a researcher must be competent and take the test seriously, as well as then after the study, the results they collect from the experiment must remain confidential and shouldn't be shared with anyone anywhere. So before 1947, the human experimentation was accepted without any thought of ethical considerations, such as having any protection from harm or having the right to withdraw. Nazi experiments were conducted very often. The Nazis had no regard towards others and would put people through intense torture and killing. Then in 1947, the Nuremberg Code was brought in to ensure any human experimented on was secure in all aspects. So these are the 10 points of the Nuremberg Code, including the main ones such as voluntary consent, meaning participants must have given informed consent to partake in the study, and ensuring that no one gets physically or psychologically harmed. Other regulations are making sure that the degree of risk does not exceed that determined by the humanitarian importance of the problem to be solved by the experiment, and having proper preparations and adequate facilities in the experiment to avoid any harm to any of the participants. So, as well as the Nuremberg Code, in 1964 the Declaration of Helsinki was brought in. These are ethical principles regarding human experimentation and was originally formed by the World Medical Association. Certain outcomes of this declaration were that voluntary consent is now essential and participants should always have the option to withdraw at any time. So here are the scenario examples of good and bad practice. So first of all, good things the researcher did well were getting volunteers. This point is pretty self-explanatory in the sense that the girls who volunteered themselves, and so the researcher didn't force them to partake. Another thing the researcher did well was doing a medical screening questionnaire. This is a form with questions about their medical health and background, so the researcher understands the limits to which they can put them through in the test and what they're capable and incapable of doing. This is good because they'll get an understanding of their background and if they have had any physical injuries or disabilities that may prevent them from taking part or increase the risk of further injury. However, on the other side, the researcher didn't supervise the girls. This means that when they were performing on the vault, the researcher didn't stand by them to make sure they were getting on with it safely and sensibly. A consequence of this would be a suspension, so this means that the researcher would be forced to leave their job for a period of time, while the ethics committee would decide on whether they are right for the job and whether they have the capability to supervise in future. Another thing the researcher didn't do was get parental consent. So parental consent is when the participants' parents must sign a document to say they allow their child to take part. In the consent form, it must include information like the procedure of the experiment, the sample chosen and why, what the participants will be put through, and finally what the hazards and risks are if they partake, and knowing that at any point in the experiment they can withdraw. As the researcher didn't get this, it is a breaking of the law, and so serious consequences can be brought in. It could be a consequence like going to a tribunal to get put on trial where the courts will judge further repercussions. These could be as harsh as imprisonment if the participant that was hurt without parental consent in the first place got hurt. And another consequence of this could be going through serious ethical training, which would be going back through in detail why they should have got parental consent and what the consequences of not getting it actually are. The way to improve this dilemma is by ensuring that they have consent from every participant's parents so that they can genuinely take part and so that the parent understands everything about the procedure and what their children will be put through. Finally, the researcher didn't show any sort of equality. The lack of equality means that a researcher mainly focuses on certain types of people. Therefore, the researcher could focus mainly on specific gender type or a specific skin colour, or in this case, the researcher focuses mainly on the medically fitter gymnasts, which technically speaking could lead to some sort of physical harm in the sense that they are depriving the medically more unfit girls from proper supervision. An improvement of this would be ensuring that at all times the participants are within the researcher's safety and protection from harm is maximised.